Captain Batra was going back to save one of the soldiers, there was someone else, some Subedar Sahab or someone, who said, "Let me go," and he pushed him aside
Yes,
and said, "You have
yes.
kids, so let me
Yeah,
go."
exactly. Yes, I think that was a great gesture on his part and just shows the ethos of the Indian Army, where young leaders lead from the front.
So, sir, how does it feel to be part of history?
Sir, as GOC in charge of the sector, the pressure on you would have been immense. And to add to it, Kargil was the first televised war in the history of India. So the eyes of the world were also on you. So, how did you withstand such immense pressure and also plan and execute this successful operation?
But then one is trained over a period of time to resist these pressures and get on with the task which has been given to you.
What was the reason behind Kargil happening, and what was Pakistan trying to achieve?
They chose Kargil as an objective, basically to take their revenge on what they presume we did in Siachen in 1984.
What exactly happened in Siachen? Because I'm sure the audience would love to know.
They were definitely on the back foot. They felt that the military had been dishonored in the eyes of the civil populace, and therefore they had to do something to restore the confidence and the pride of people.
Sir, the first casualty of this intelligence failure was Lieutenant Saurav Kalia and the 5 soldiers of his patrol who were brutally tortured and killed in the most inhuman manner. As a citizen of India, I find it traumatizing even today to think of it. And what Pakistan did was against Geneva Convention. So why have they not been declared as war criminals?
It was a terrible incident and definitely a very black mark on the Pakistan army.
Sir, you must have been so proud to have led such brave legends whose words are like an anthem to us. We have read of them, heard of them, but you had the privilege of leading them. Can you share some of their acts of valor with us?
Subedar Major Sanjay Kumar of 13th Jackrif, who along with Vikram Batra, both have been awarded the Paramveer Chakra. It's a rare sort of achievement for a battalion.
So in Kargil, artillery played a very important role in reducing the casualties and winning the war. Could you throw some light on it?
Like I mentioned, they played a very, very important role in bringing us victory.
Even though Air Force played a very important role, but as a lay person, I'm asking, why did our Air Force not go and just bomb them out?
But you must remember that at that time, we were highly dependent on the artillery.
Every casualty is a loss of a dear friend to the other remaining soldiers. They are not just legends like they are to the outside world, they are the friends they shared their dreams with. So, how does the leadership keep the morale up in such critical situations?
The units are so highly focused that time to feel sorry or to weep for their comrades is a later, when there is adequate time available.
So, why do you think that Pakistan, even though the odds were in their favor, lost the war?
Our leadership was far, far superior. Their commanding officers and company commanders were nowhere in the line of fire. They were in depth, far away from the line of fire.
If death strikes before I prove my blood, I swear I will kill death. Immortal words by late Captain Manoj Kumar Pandey. Soldiers dedicate their life for the nation. I want to know that what is it that a soldier wants from the nation? I have the honor and privilege of having with me Lieutenant General Mohinder Puri, PVSM, UISM, who was the GOC, General Officer Commanding of 8th Mountain Div, which gave us legends like Captain Vikram Batra, Grenadier Yogendra Singh Yadav, Lieutenant Thapar, to name a few. And it was under his command that we won Kargil. So, sir, how does it feel to be part of history?
Yes, it's a great honor to have led a division in war. I think very few professional soldiers have that unique credit to their honor, and I felt it was really honorable to be a part of that operation. And well, that's how the army is. You look forward when you're in uniform to partake in an operation, and I was lucky to be given that opportunity.
So it is very humble of you, but we all know that you were part of history. You are part of history. So, sir, as GOC in charge of the sector, the pressure on you would have been immense. And to add to it, Kargil was the first televised war in the history of India. So the eyes of the world were also on you. So how did you withstand such immense pressure and also plan and execute this successful operation?
I think I need to go a bit back in time and tell you where the division was at the start of the of Operation Vijay. 8th Mountain Division was in the valley, looking after counter-insurgency operations, and we were tasked to assume operational responsibility of Mashko and the Dras sector on 1st of June. So it took some time for this decision making, because it's you don't want to upstick a division and leave that void, a vacuum, to be filled up by the militants. So it took some time that the readjustment of forces could take place, and then the division was moved across the Zojila Pass. And on 1st of June, I assumed the operational responsibility of Mashko and Dras sector. Now, till that time, we had no success. A better part of May had gone, and as you know, there was a lot of talk in the media that no success is coming our way, and really the morale of the nation and of the army was not at a very high pitch. The pressures were definitely there, and pressures get accentuated by what you hear around you also.
Yes.
Your own pressures are there, but what you hear around you also adds to the pressures. But then one is trained over a period of time to resist these pressures and get on with the task which has been given to you. And that was to restore the sanctity of the line of control and open the national highway as early as possible, so that traffic, both civilian and military, could move on that. That was also the time, which is a very short window available to us to carry out the winter stocking of our posts, in the Siachen and in the areas in Ladakh, as well as the civil garrison. So military and civil traffic use this road extensively. And so that was a very high priority task. So the pressures definitely are very much there, and you have the apprehension of not being able to succeed. So that it adds to your pressure. So all these things go hand in hand, and well, you have to then plan, and you have to overcome these pressures, and you can't show these pressures to your command, because if you yourself are showing these pressures, then it passes down the line absolutely.
Yes, sir. It can be very lonely at the top.
Yes, it is. Particularly in a war situation, it does get a bit lonely. But then you have so many other activities which are running concurrently that you keep yourself away from these, thoughts which are external thoughts, and focus on the task which is in hand.
Thank you so much for sharing that, sir. Sir, I would love to take this opportunity to ask from someone who saw Kargil firsthand as to what was the reason behind Kargil happening, and what was Pakistan trying to achieve by Kargil, occupying Kargil?
Yeah, after the nuclear devices which were exploded by both the countries, Prime Minister Vajpayee, if you recall, in February '99, had gone to Islamabad. And thereafter, there was a political thaw between the two countries. The relations was said to improve. But, yeah, but unfortunately, what happened, the military had different intentions, and they chose Kargil as an objective, basically to, take their revenge on what they presume we did in Siachen in 1984. So Kargil was a very lucrative area to carry out this operation because over a period of time, over 50 years, during the winters, both the armies used to withdraw their posts because of the inhospitable terrain, the heavy snowfall, and the difficulty in maintaining these posts during the winter months. So this year too, both the armies withdrew their posts along the line of control and came back to their bases. But Pakistan then started intruding into these vacant areas and intruded well deep into our site over a frontage of nearly 140 kilometers.
Okay.
So that's a very, very large area. And this area is so inhospitable and so difficult a terrain that it wasn't just possible to discern as to where the intrusions had taken place. Till the first week of May, when some local shepherd passed this warning to the unit nearby, and thereafter the entire things got into motion. And then we realized that a major intrusion has taken place, but that was after some time. We were quite in the dark, like you mentioned. There was a intelligence failure, not of the civil alone, and the military also failed. As far as the intelligence is concerned, the troops in contact also were not able to give us this information. And it took some time for us to get our intelligence in order and to get a workable plan so that we could push back the intruders across the line of control. So that was generally the genesis of why Pakistan came, and they came basically to internationalize the Kashmir issue, which they thought was lying dormant at that time, to change the alignment of the line of control. Because if they had come so deep, and if we were not able to push them back, they would have got hold of this complete area, and perhaps it was their revenge for what they presume, in their perception, what we did in 1984 in Siachen. And so these were some of the issues which were involved at that point of time, and why Kargil, because of the unmanned gaps over such a wide frontage, that they chose this objective. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing this. And if I ask, if you could quickly take us through what exactly happened in Siachen, because I'm sure the audience would love to know.
Yeah, Siachen in early 80s, we realized that Pakistan was sending military and mountaineering expeditions to their area. Now the 71, after the 71 war, when delineation of the line of control was done, it terminated at a point called NJ 9842.
Okay.
And thereafter, the description was vague. It just said, thence north to the glacier. Now, when we followed the contours on the ground, the north of the glacier was different from what the Pakistanis understood. So they were sending expeditions into our area, and therefore we had to sort of preempt them, and we went on to the Saltoro ranges and occupied the glacier. It was basically a preemptive move to stop Pakistan from intruding into these areas. So that is generally briefly the background to Siachen. But they have not reconciled. You see, after 71 defeat, which they didn't accept very gracefully, the Siachen, occupation of Siachen by us, because of the Pakistan military actions and the mountaineering expeditions, foreign expeditions coming. So they were definitely on the back foot. They felt that the military had been dishonored in the eyes of the civil populace, and therefore they had to do something to restore the confidence and the pride of the military. And of course, take revenge on Siachen.
Yes, sir, but they didn't succeed. Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, the first casualty of this intelligence failure was Lieutenant Saurav Kalia, and the 5 soldiers of his patrol who were brutally tortured and killed in the most inhuman manner. As a citizen of India, I find it traumatizing even today to think of it. And I can only imagine how painful it would have been for you as a fellow soldier. And what Pakistan did was against Geneva Convention. So why have they not been declared as war criminals?
Yeah, what happened to Saurav Kalia is very, very unfortunate. And I think the Pakistan army must take total blame for what they did to his body. They caused his eyes mutilated and beyond recognition. And I think it was something no dignified army in the world ever does. We respect the dead even if they are the enemies, like we did
Yes.
later on after the operations in providing a decent burial to them. I think it was the most inhuman act by any army, and it was most disappointing. But you know, that's all. I suppose the country is being taken it up, and there have been off and on, pressures to get this into the various world forums. While the world is aware of it, but regrettably, nothing has been done to assuage the feelings of the family. It was a terrible incident and definitely a very black mark on the Pakistan army.
Yes, and I'm sure it must have been so painful to all of you.
Yes, it definitely was. You see, you don't want to see a fellow soldier being treated in this terrible manner. It is most inhuman, like I said, and I don't think any dignified army which prides itself on its uniform will ever resort to such a thing.
Yes, sir, it is a shame. It is a shame. It is a black mark against the Pakistani army.
It will be my honor to read the last letter written by Lieutenant Vijayan Thapar, VRC, one of our heroes. Dearest Papa, Mama and Granny, by the time you get this letter, I will be observing you from the sky, enjoying the hospitality of the Apsaras. I have no regrets. In fact, even if I become a human again, I will join the army and fight for my nation. If you can, please come and see where the Indian Army fought for your tomorrow. As far as the unit is concerned, the new chaps should be told about this sacrifice. I hope my photo will be kept in the Ekoi Mandir. Whatever organ can be taken should be taken. Contribute some money to orphanage and keep on giving rupees 50 to Ruxana per month and meet Yogi Baba. Best of luck to Bindya. Never forget this sacrifice of men. Papa, you should feel proud. Mama, so should you. I loved her. Mamaji, forgive me for every wrong I did. Okay, then it's time for me to join my clan of Dirty Durjan. My assault party has 12 chaps. Best of luck to you all. Live life king size. Yours, Robin. Sir, you must have been so proud to have led such brave legends whose words are like an anthem to us. We have read of them, heard of them, but you had the privilege of leading them. Can you share some of their acts of valor with us?
Yeah, there are so many incidents, and it would be wrong on my part just to share incidents of valor of just a couple of them. The casualties speak for the type of sacrifices which the soldiers and the officers made. But I think in the overall, there are legends which came out of this war. We've got three Paramveer Chakras and I think about nine Mahavir Chakras and about 45 to 40, 45 Veer Chakras. So all these people fought extremely bravely and against all odds in the beginning, and earned a name for themselves, for their regiments, for the army, and for their families. So these are legends which will go down as a part of folklore in the Indian military. So I think it's incorrect to just keep talking of names individually, but all of them, I would say, did contribute to the ultimate victory. And I think the bravery of our young officers and men, and like you said at the beginning, 248 killed from 8 Mountain Division alone. That's a very large number of people who were killed. So I think one has to appreciate the valor of all these young officers, brave officers and men, and the junior commissioned officers who sacrificed their lives and went beyond the call of duty to achieve the victory for the country and for the country, for the military and their own regiments. So I think it's a very proud achievement by them.
You're very correct. And I totally understand as a leader, as the commanding officer, it is very difficult because you are aware that every single person did their best, gave their best to achieve the victory we had. So I totally respect that.
Yeah, a lot of people who got awards, but there are others also who've fought extremely well. They contributed to the victory, but perhaps their achievements were not glorified in the way the others had been. So it's wrong to think that only these people who got awards were the achievers and the rest were just bystanders. I think everyone in the division, whoever went into the operation, whoever went into battle, fought extremely bravely, and those who sacrificed their lives, of course, salute to them and their families, and to the rest, a job well done.
Yes, sir, like you rightly said, salute to all of them. Sir, I totally respect and I also understand. But if I may request, if you could share even one or two incidences of valor and courage, because we would love to know how our soldiers did what they did to get us that victory.
Okay, I'll share some incidents which, not of officers, but I'll share some with officers and with the men.
Yes.
Let's start with Captain Vikram Batra, since he is definitely a legend who's left a name for himself and his family. Now, we were to go for the capture of point 5140. Now, if I convert that into feet, it's about 18,000 feet. Now, that's a very extreme high altitude. And Vikram Batra was given the task by his commanding officer, General Y.K. Joshi, who is now the corps commander in Ladakh.
Okay.
He was the commanding officer at that time. And he was given the task to capture 5140. So there was a lot of fighting on when they reached the top. And the Pakistanis got onto the net, onto a radio communication net. And both sides were abusing each other in very Thet Punjabi.
Yes.
So then finally, Vikram Batra's company and there's another company along with them, they got the better of the enemy. And we managed to capture point 5140. And that is the time when he made the success signal to his CO, which was Ye Dil Mange More. So
Yes.
that is how this became so popular, Dil Mange More. So this was one of the very incidents. It's an extreme bravery shown by this young boy. And, it's something remarkable which goes into the annals of our history in golden letters.
Yes.
And then he repeated this when we went for point 4875. To save another one of his comrades, he went into the attack trying to save somebody from the line of fire. And when he was very close to the post, he got killed. I think this is again shows extreme courage under fire. And for this, he was given the Paramveer Chakra, which is the highest gallantry award of the country.
I had read somewhere when Major Batra Captain Batra was going back to save one of the soldiers. There was someone else, some Subedar Sahab or someone, who said, "Let me go," and he pushed him aside and said, "You have kids, so let me go."
Exactly. Yes, I think that was a great gesture on his part, and just shows the ethos of the Indian Army, where young leaders lead from the front,
Yes.
and they just say, "Follow me," and just word of command, people just follow the leaders. So I
Yes.
think it's a great quality of the Indian Army and the
Yes.
soldiers and our leaders, young officers and commanding officers and brigade commanders, who have this, the men have the confidence to be led by such great leaders. No, along with this, I must give you, now that you asked me, I'll give you just two or three other very interesting
Yes.
incidents. There was Havildar Yoginder Yadav, who was from 18 Grenadiers, and his battalion was given the task of capturing Tiger Hill. Now, Tiger Hill, if you recall, had become a household name along with Tololing. And since you mentioned in the beginning that it was the first televised war, so everyone was quite familiar and conversant with these names. So in the morning, they attacked throughout the night. They moved, and when they reached the top, he was subjected to very heavy fire. Yoginder Singh got 15 bullets on his body, and yet he wasn't. He refused to be evacuated, and with his rifle, then he knocked off a couple of guys.
Oh my
So
God.
this again, we managed to capture Tiger Hill thanks to his bravery. And he's a living Paramveer Chakra. Today he's a Subedar Major, and he's a living Paramveer Chakra. Similarly, there is a case of Subedar Major Sanjay Kumar of 13 Jackraft, who, along with Vikram Batra, both have been awarded the Paramveer Chakra. It's a rare sort of achievement for a battalion to have two Paramveer Chakras in one operation.
Yes.
So I think it's a great achievement for that battalion, and extremely. Now, let me also just give you another case of Major Acharya from two Rajputana Rifles. Now, this battalion was commanded by late Colonel Ravindranath, who was an extremely competent CO who really led from the front, and he ran a very highly motivated team, like Colonel Joshi at that time, and now General Joshi, both outstanding leaders, along with Brigadier Kushal Thakur, who captured Tiger Hill. So now telling you about this incident, Major Acharya, he was he was going for an attack with his company on a place called Three Pimples, Black Rock, and this was the name of those objectives. And he was killed. So his daughter, his wife was expecting, and the daughter was born 6 months later.
Oh, okay.
And she's today a young girl of 19, 20. And the father wrote such a lovely letter to his wife on how to bring up the girl. And today, this girl is a success story by herself. She's a lawyer, undergoing a law course, and a very, very capable young girl. So, this again of the human values, of the family values, they're all ingrained very deeply into the art. And there are so many stories like this which one can continue, but I think then of Vijayan Thapa, you mentioned about the letter which he wrote.
Yes.
I mean, just imagine writing that sort of a letter which was so predictive of what his future is going to be. And his father is also a retired colonel, Colonel Thapar. He visits the place where his son lost his life every year. The last 20 years, he has been to that place. Of course, now he's a bit old. So since 3-4 years, he is not walking up. At times he gets the helicopter. But he has paid his respects to that place where his son died the last 20 years. So, I mean, just see the courage of, you can make out what the son was by seeing what the father has been doing.
Yes.
To keep the memory of his son alive. I think it's tremendous, absolutely. And this is this is just a part of the story of the Indian Army. There's so many other stories which are there and which are a part of Indian folklore.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And it is, sometimes you feel at loss
What do you say about such legends? And when we hear about them, sometimes, it is the slogans, and it sounds very glamorous, but we also have to remember that most of them were very young. They were very young, and what they did, most of us can't even imagine doing that. So, huge respect. That makes me so proud of being an army officer's daughter. And I was talking to General Cardozo, and he also mentioned the same thing which you did, that our officers lead from the front. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and
And incidentally, Colonel Cardozo is also a living legend.
yes,
He's the most respected, general of the Indian Army.
yes, yes,
And yeah, you know how he lost his leg by
yes.
using his own kukri to knock it off.
Oh
So
my God, he is such a legend and so humble about it. Like
very, very good. Yes, outstanding. Absolutely.
very humble. And even when I was going through the list, sir, of our Kargil Bravehearts, most of the awards which were given posthumously were awarded to the officers. So when I was reading that, I don't know the statistics and all that. I just went through it, and then I was thinking that General Cardozo was right. All of these men were leading from the front, and that is why they are no longer here. And will I be right in saying that that is one of the reasons why they generate that kind of loyalty from their men?
Yes, I think, firstly, the type of training which they get right from the day, 15 and a half, 16 years, those who go through the NDA, and a little older with those who go through IMA or any other form of induction into the army as officers. I think it is deeply ingrained in them that it is their duty to lead from the front. And the type of motivation that they have and the atmosphere which they create within their subunits and with their units is highly commendable. And this is what marks us, totally different from all the other armies of the world. I think the officers here do lead from the front. There is no two ways about it. And you rightly said, the ratio of the officers killed was 1 is to 20, which is a very, very high ratio. That means one officer for 20 jawans
Yes.
who was killed. That's a very, very high ratio, very casualty ratio. So it just shows the type of leadership displayed by these young officers. And it is not to take away the bravery of the soldiers
No.
who followed them, of the junior commissioned officers, who were of a higher age group than the officers and the men, but yet they followed them so that they could achieve the task which is given to them. I think it's a rare quality in any army to have this type of soldiery in their rank and file.
Yes, you're absolutely right, sir. Like, I was talking to my father, and he said that when they were young officers, whenever they came back from an exercise, before going to the mess, the CO ensured, because that time they were very young, that they went and saw that all their men had food, were well rested, everything was taken care of, and then only they could go and have their dinner and take care of themselves, and that is commendable.
Absolutely, absolutely. That ethos is still retained in the army to a very, very large extent. It's fully across the board. Not to a large extent, it's, I think, across the board as far as the army is concerned. The care and the administration, the looking after of the men is always a very high
Yes, sir. And that sign of brilliant leadership.
priority. Yes, absolutely. The young level is it's brilliant, absolutely, no doubt.
So in Kargil, artillery played a very important role in reducing the casualties and winning the war. Could you throw some light on it?
We were suffering heavy casualties. And just before the first attack, my commander, artillery, again a very bright officer, Brigadier Lapinder Singh, who retired as a general later on, we came up with a plan of using the Bofors in a direct firing. Now, Bofors is a trajectory weapon, but using it in a direct firing role was totally a new sort of a thought. And full credit goes to the Brigadier Lakwinder Singh, for having initiated this change in the employment of the artillery.
So
And
if
these were,
I'm so sorry to stop you,
yeah,
but you use certain technical words which lot of us would not understand. So my only request is, sir, if you could also share what you meant, that there was a new kind of use for Bofors, that would help
okay.
me and others.
Okay. Bofors, like any artillery gun, is an indirect firing weapon. That means from the gun position, you don't see a target, or you see a target, and that the fire is directed onto the target.
Okay, sir.
But okay, now here we planned to use the Bofors in a direct firing mode. That means just like any other weapon, to lay the gun right onto the target and fire it directly onto the object. So this is a very innovative use, and full credit goes to the Commander Artillery of my division, Brigadier Lakwinder Singh. And we devised this plan, and it became very, very effective. We knocked off a lot of the enemy bunkers and their posts, and a lot of casualties they sustained because of this. And to an extent that the infantry units which were going into the attack were so confident of this weapon that, I many a time said that they're using it like their own support weapon, whereas it's supposed to be a support weapon of the formation.
Yes.
But they were using it with such great effect. And I think Lakwinder changed the complete concept of employment of the artillery, of the Bofors gun in this war. And it was a very, very critical time, and very innovative on our part to use this gun, which was again a battle winning factor. Without the artillery, we would have had pretty high casualties. So by the time we finally went on to the objective, a lot of the artillery had softened the target, so that though we still suffered very heavy casualties, because there are various tactical maneuvers, and the artillery has to lift at a certain point of time for your own safety of the attacking troops, and that is the time when you suffer quite heavy casualties. But the artillery performed extremely well, and they were undoubtedly a battle-winning factor, as good as the infantry in bringing us victory in the Kargil war.
Yes, sir. And sir, if you could share it for the audience, I'm sure a lot of them know, but from an army perspective, if you could explain it to them, that why this is so amazing, because the height, and it was almost impossible to climb, and so it kind of turned the tide in our favor. Am I right in saying that, or I'm going too far?
No, I think the enemy was sitting on top,
Yes,
well
sir.
entrenched, sitting in dominating heights. So it's always a problem to attack uphill. And any defender in the mountains always takes positions which are dominating,
Yes.
so that the attacker has to perforce climb up and against the grain of the country, and it is a very, very difficult proposition, particularly when you are operating at heights of anything over 15,000 feet. So, the inhospitality of the terrain, the weather conditions, the high altitude effect, that you walk one step, you have to stop for a breather. And these men attacking troops were carrying loads. They were carrying their heavy loads on their back till a certain point. So it was an extremely and a challenging sort of a way to go and capture these posts. And in this, till the artillery support was possible without incurring any casualties on us, we used the artillery support. But at a certain point of time, like I mentioned, you have to lift the artillery, stop the artillery fire, and that is when the infantry has to go and carry out the final assault. So in such extreme high altitude, it is very, very difficult.
Yes, sir. Sir, I would just like to share that my father, he's a gunner, he's from artillery.
Excellent.
Yes,
They
sir.
were, like I mentioned, they played a very, very important role in bringing us victory.
And so, even though Air Force played a very important role, but as a lay person, I'm asking, why did our Air Force not go and just bomb them out? It shows that I do not have that kind of technical knowledge, but I thought maybe I'll ask that because actually one of my friends had asked me this and I did not know.
Yeah, the Air Force is a very critical service amongst the three services, and its reach is very long. And but they had restrictions like we had earlier, and we were we were surprised, and they were equally surprised. We were not trained to fight at heights of 18,000 feet, and neither were they trained to operate at such heights. Plus, we had the problem of a very strict terms of reference given to us not to cross the line of control. This was a term of reference given by the political
Leadership.
leadership. And the brain of the country, in case our Air Force had to be effectively used, they would have had to go from a south to north direction, which would have involved crossing the line of control, which was not allowed. So propose they had to go east or west and east, and there the accuracy was not possible. And till we got till over a period of time, they also experimented innovations till they got the laser guided bombs, and their accuracy of engaging targets increased considerably. But you must remember that at that time, we were highly dependent on the artillery because you see, when our Air Force strikes a target, they didn't have night fighting capabilities. So there's adequate time between them engaging a target during the daylight hours and the attack going in at night or in the early. They have enough recovery time, should I say, the enemy. So that is why the artillery was more effective. But the Air Force definitely, as the time went on and as the operations progressed, their contributions also increased. What they did in Monto Talo in my joining division was fantastic, absolutely, when they knocked off their administrative base. And the biggest contribution which I thought of the Air Force was it was a very morale lifting factor for us. So when you see your own aircraft going over and engaging the enemy, it's a very, very big morale booster. And at the same time, it's a very degrading for the morale of the enemy. So it helped us to quite an extent, and I think the Air Force contribution was noteworthy.
Thank you so much for sharing that because I used to wonder. So, if we had the permission to cross over, then maybe we would not have lost so many lives, is what I'm thinking in my own mind right now.
Every casualty is a loss of a dear friend to the other remaining soldiers. They are not just legends like they are to the outside world, they are the friends they shared their dreams with. Trained side by side, knew each other's family, shared jokes. So, how does the leadership keep the morale up in such critical situations?
Loss of lives is inevitable in war. I mean, there is no war where you don't lose lives. It's most unfortunate, but that is the truth. And it's a fact of life that in a war, you have to lose lives so that you gain whatever you want to gain at the end of the conflict. So your point is very relevant, because you're living with with your comrades, you're living with your friends, and there are many a times when I used to go and give a pep talk to a unit, shake hands with the men and the officers, and in the evening when they used to go into the attack, suddenly learn at 12 o'clock that there's one of them no more. So it does have a very, very strong impact on you, on your emotions. But then you have to get over these emotions, and the units are so highly focused that time to feel sorry or to weep for their comrades is a later when there is adequate time available. At that point of time, it's the heat of the moment which gets you going. It's your motivation which gets you going. It's your inspiration of the unit which gets you going. And the casualties which you suffer, perhaps, it's on a later time frame that you sit down and, reminiscence of your friendship with people and that. But at that very point of time, I think it's basically to get the task over and done.
So much more respect. It's like army people, soldiers, do not even get time at that time to grieve. They have to wait. They have to say, grief, wait, I have got to serve the nation and then I will cry. And so I think the training which our soldiers, officers, and all the other soldiers go through is highly responsible for creating that kind of mindset.
Yes, totally. Like I mentioned, it's right from a tender age of 15 and a half, 16, 17 years to 20 years, 21 years that you get inducted into the army. You start wearing uniform at a very, very young age. So you're so highly motivated that you take grief as a part of in the line of your duty. And particularly in a war situation, you don't have time to grieve at that stage. It's just, you're so highly focused on your aim and the task which has been given to you that you just go ahead to achieve that.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So why do you think that Pakistan, even though the odds were in their favor, lost the war? They were entrenched on such heights which were assumed to be unclimbable. And Indian troops were easy targets, but we still won and won gloriously. So how did we win against such tremendous odds?
I think it's a very good question. What Pakistan had initially planned was tactically brilliant. What General Musharraf had planned was a very brilliant tactical plan. But it had a lot of strategic errors in this. He had not thought of the operation, or he had not thought of how the conflict was going to terminate. He had not worked that out, whether it was his logistics, whether it was how the operation, what would be the responses of India. So all this had not been bargained by him or his team. And the second aspect was the leadership. Like I've been mentioning throughout, that our leadership was far, far superior. Their commanding officers and company commanders were nowhere in the line of fire. They were in depth far away from the line of fire. Whereas our officers were very much a part of the operation. Every attack, their presence was there to lead their men. And I think this is the single most contributory factor to our success. That firstly, we had a cause because the Pakistanis had intruded into our territory and we didn't want any intrusions into our territory. It was a violation of our territory, which no country can stand. So first was that, it was a cause to fight and retrieve the honor of the country. The second was the bravery which was displayed by our leadership, by the young leadership, by the middle leadership, on how to really operate in such extreme high altitudes, in inclement weather, and with very meager resources initially to really beat back the enemy. I think these are the major contributory factors. Of course, the support came from the country, the support came from the civilians, the support came from the media, from our own channels. But nevertheless, it's the boots on the ground which really tell you whether you're going to win or lose. And I think leadership was exemplary in showing us it.
If death strikes before I prove my blood, I swear I will kill death. Immortal words by late Captain Manoj Kumar Pandey. Soldiers dedicate their life for the nation. I want to know that what is it that a soldier wants from the nation?
What a soldier wants from a nation is respect, honor, respect, dignity. I think money is not a part of the soldier's requirement. It is how the citizens respect him, whether dead or whether alive. We saw how they respected him when he died.
Yes.
It was thanks to the media, which had such vast coverage, that this was a very motivational sort of a fact for the entire country. And it really involved the citizens in the war. They also felt as a part of the ongoing operation. So I think the involvement of the citizens was a very, very big motivating factor for the army. And what the soldier requires is, that his requirements must be met. You've got the point which I'm trying to say. See,
Yes.
now earlier I used to tell you when you joined the army, and perhaps your father also would be reinforcing what I'm saying. If you wrote to some government official, they had the decency to respond to you. Today,
Yes.
there is total, there is no sort of a response from the civil administration. I do hope this improves because in foreign countries, the respect which the soldiers have is something which we must emulate and try to follow. I think that's a very important aspect. And what else does a soldier want? He wants the citizens to be good human beings, to be good citizens of this country, so that the services feel proud to defend them.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's the least which we can offer to our soldiers who are willing to die for us.
Kargil is a saga of immense courage, exceptional bravery, and leadership shown by the soldiers of this great Indian army, especially by our young officers. We celebrate Vijay Divas because 524 brave hearts died for it, and countless soldiers were wounded, and every soldier put all they had to once again protect our country, our India. When you feel that life is tough, you feel ready to give up, think of these brave men and women of the Indian Defence Forces who live a very difficult life, but instead of thinking of it as a difficulty, they take it as a challenge, an adventure, and emerge a winner. Sir, I salute you and once again like to thank you for sharing your life experience with us. It will enrich all of us. I will also like to share that Lieutenant General Puri has written a brilliant book on Kargil. It is a must read for everyone who wants to know about Kargil from a person who was a leader in guiding us to victory. Also, please follow him on Twitter. I will share the link in the description below. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please like, share and subscribe to Ruchi Singh Talks on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Thank you.